Mohammed Shamji and Elana Fric. Shamji had what seemed like an ideal life. He, a neurosurgeon of renown, her, a much-loved family doctor. The lifestyle they had is one that most of us could only dream of. That is, until Elana's body was found in a suitcase by the Humber River in Ontario, and the dream became a nightmare. This is Night Owl. Welcome back. Today we'll be whisked away to the scenic city of Toronto, the capital of Ontario in Canada, home of the CN Tower, not to mention the Blue Jays and the Toronto Maple Leaves. It was also the home of Mohammed and Elana Shamji, a couple that seemed to be living the perfect life. Of course, things are seldom what they seem. We'll start with Elana. She was born in 1977 to Croatian parents, Joe and Elana Fric, who immigrated to Canada and settled in Windsor, Ontario, in hopes of gaining employment in the local automotive factories. She went to St. Anne's High School, but by the time she arrived there, she was already an overachiever, especially when it came to science and math. She loved to write poetry and practice Croatian dancing. Her teen years were like most. She had a boyfriend. She worked corn detasseling during the summer. Pretty much a normal teenage life. There was one thing though. You know how a lot of kids wanted to follow in their parents' footsteps? Well, she decided that factory work just wasn't for her. She decided to become a doctor instead. And why not? She definitely had the smarts for it. And she followed through with it. In fact, that's how she met her future husband. One night in 2003, she was in the rec room at the Ottawa hospital, where she was playing pool. And let's face it, she probably excelled at that too. But on this night, she caught the eye of a young man named Mohammed Shamji. The dude took one look, and it was like hubba hubba. And who was he? Well, he was a neurosurgery resident at the hospital. He was considered a star pupil. Already graduated from Ashbury College in Yale. Holy crap, I'm not even smart enough to walk by either of those schools. He pretty much was following in his dad's footsteps. His dad was one Dr. Farid Shamji, who was a really big deal in the area. Not only was the dude a renowned thoracic surgeon, but the guy even had an award named after him. Can you imagine that? All sorts of people win awards. But to actually have one named after you, especially when you're, still alive. Now Mohammed, or Mo as his friends called him, did have an air of superiority about him, but at the same time he was pretty shy, reserved, and even a bit awkward. In fact, Elana would tell and retell the story about how their first date almost didn't lead to a second. He invited her out for drinks, to which she eagerly accepted, and let's face it, she was pretty smitten by old Dr. Love. But, at the end of the date, he asked if it would be okay for him to set her up with a friend of his. Gee, that must have been a bit awkward. He was actually pretty shocked to discover that she had the hots for him. At any rate, they did indeed start dating. Well, sort of. You see, she was absolutely, heads over heels in love with the guy, almost awestruck by his intelligence and the accomplishments he already made. In fact, she didn't really feel all that worthy of him. The sad part is, neither did he. In fact, Elana actually started off as Mohammed's side piece, seeing how he already had a girlfriend when he started to see Elana. Which a lot of people that was kinda odd, seeing how he was such a meek dude and all. Man, it's always the quiet ones. Now, at what point he broke it off with his girlfriend isn't too clear. I'm assuming he did eventually, so that he could focus on him and Elana. But the thing is, Elana put so much effort into their relationship, whereas Mohammed couldn't care less. He wasn't even interested in meeting any of her friends. Most people just couldn't see what she saw in him. And I gotta admit, I'm having a little trouble with that myself. Dig this. The guy couldn't even be bothered to show up at Elana's medical school graduation. He claimed he was sick, but in truth, he just took off and was partying with his friends. Now, she wasn't stupid. She knew there were issues in their relationship. In fact, she broke up with him twice during their first year of dating. But he was able to convince her to come back both times. Then, in 2004, Elana decided it was time for Mohammed to meet Ma and Pa. So, she took him home to Windsor for Easter. And well, Joe and Elana Fric just wasn't all that keen on old Mohammed. He seemed pretty antisocial to them. He seemed like he'd rather be anywhere but there. He had no interest in socializing with Joe and Elana at all. Her father even advised her not to settle for a guy that is that skinny and ugly. Gee, give it to me straight, Doc. I can take it. At any rate, she pretty much ignored dear old Dad's advice and continued to date Mohammed. And well, time marched on. Then a couple months later, she found out that she was pregnant. which sort of put Mohammed in between a rock and a hard place, at least, when it comes to his folks. You see, they are devout Ismaili Muslims, so on one hand, having a kid out of wedlock was a big no-no. And on the other hand, well, they would most definitely rather him marry someone of his faith, and not a Christian like Elana. But, in the end, he decided to marry Elana. He figured that his parents would be a little bit less cheesed off with that option. So, they started the task of planning a wedding. Wait, did I say a wedding? What I meant to say was that they had to plan not just one, but 2 weddings. One for his family, the second for her family. Wow, can y'all imagine that? I mean, planning 1 wedding is stressful enough, but 2? Man, I think I got off lucky. On the 1st of September 2004, they held the traditional Ismaili Muslim wedding for his family. Once that wedding was done, they then had to plan for their second one, which would be held in Windsor at a Catholic church. But there was a bit of an issue. Now, anyone that has been married in the Christian or Catholic tradition normally has a counseling or a series of counseling sessions with the priest before he signs off on it. I know I did. Well, Mohammed, he absolutely refused. He even tried to convince one of Elana's friends to go to these sessions on behalf of Mohammed. Dude, I don't think it really works that way. Well, as you could guess, Elana's friend said no. But the wedding still proceeded. Shortly after their second wedding, they got themselves a little house in Ottawa, just a stone's throw from the hospital. They both continued their respective residencies. Her in her family medicine, he in his neurosurgery. But on a cold winter's day in January 2005, after a pretty tough pregnancy, they gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Elana was over the moon. For her, it was love at first sight when she first held their new bundle of joy. As for Mohammed, well, I don't think he really could have cared less. It seemed that the only thing he truly loved was his work. In fact, when the dude would get home from work, he would hardly say boo to his wife or kid. I mean, he may say a quick hello as he rushed by them heading upstairs to study. Oh my good lord, dude. Are you saying that you're such a brilliant doctor-to-be, and yet you can't take 10 to 15 minutes out of your busy day to hang with your new kid? Wow. Of course, as you probably could have guessed, him having a hard time prioritizing his life wasn't his only issue he had. About 3 weeks after their daughter was born, they had a few visitors. His parents and aunt and uncle stopped by to see the baby. Well, at the time that they had arrived, Elana was upstairs breastfeeding her daughter. Well, that cheesed off Mohammed to no end. You see, he was of the mind that she should have been at the door to greet their guests. Geez man, why didn't you just have her chained up by the door and have her announce your guest like some kind of damn butler? But much to Elana's credit, she did stand up to him in front of his parents. She said that she felt like she had to walk on eggshells around him. Now, Elana wasn't an idiot. She knew that Mohammed had a bit of an anger problem for some time now. I mean, he'd insult her, saying she was getting fat, and that her mom was a cow and stuff like that. But for some reason, she tolerated it, and she never let her friends or family know how toxic their home had become. Man, I just can't imagine living like that, or saying junk like that to someone you're supposed to love. It just boggles the mind. Then, about a week after Mohammed's family visited their son and granddaughter, the Frics received a phone call. Elana's dad answered. It was Mohammed. He shouted into the phone, Mr. Fric, Elana wants a divorce. I bet her dad was probably thinking about bloody time. But Elana grabbed the phone from her hubby and told her dear old dad not to worry, and that everything was cool. Then a short time later the Frics were getting all gussied up for church when the phone rang. They weren't able to answer it quickly enough. But seeing how it was their daughter, they did the whole *69 thing to call them back. And well, someone did answer, but then made a quick attempt to hang it up, but they accidentally left it off the hook. Which meant, unfortunately, the Frics could hear every disgusting thing that Mohammed was saying to Elana. And I gotta tell ya, if my research is accurate, then I'm not about to repeat it. It's stuff that you should never say to a woman, or anyone else for that matter. Man, imagine being her folks and having to hear some dude scream at your daughter like that, and you being so far away. You'd feel so helpless. Anyway, in 2005, Mohammed was able to get into Duke University in North Carolina. I guess they had a PhD program in biomedical engineering that he wanted to take. Wow, just the name of that program gives me mad scientist vibes. As for Elana, well, I guess there was a master's program about public policy that she was interested in, so they both planned on moving there in the fall of that year. Then one fateful day in May, they had yet another argument, but this one was different than all the others. This one had become physical. And he did hurt Elana pretty bad. I mean, I guess it wasn't bad enough for her to need the hospital, but it was definitely bad enough to scare her. In fact, it scared her so bad that she packed up her kid and ran to a friend's condo where she could hide out. And of course, Mohammed tried to find her by calling up her friends. But eventually, he decided she could have the house and he'd go stay with his folks. Well, old Mohammed wound up being charged with 3 different offenses, one of which is for what he physically did to his wife, and the other 2 were for making threats to do her injury. It's at this point that Mohammed started thinking, "Oh, come on, all I wanted to do was control every aspect of mine and my family's life. What's wrong with that? And now I have no control of none of it. Not to mention these charges could really mess up his career. And he felt it's all because of his wife. I mean, he started realizing that with these charges hanging over his head, he probably wouldn't be able to make it past the Canadian-American border to go to Duke University. Hell, he might not even end up practicing medicine. To that I say, Buttercup. He should keep in mind that it wasn't Elana's fault. It was his. I mean, he's the one that put his hands on his wife. As far as I'm concerned, it would serve him right if he could only get a job in the fast food industry." A few weeks later, Elana got her daughter baptized, and of course people asked, "Hey Elana, where's Mohammed? Where's that little ray of sunshine?" And she said, yeah, he wanted to come, but he had to work. He worked so very hard, you know. But she did confide in one of her cousins named Rob, and pretty much told him what was going on. He of course said, Elana, you have options. I mean, you can always stay with me, but she said, No, I'd actually like to work it out. And work it out is pretty much what they actually wound up doing. I'm not sure how good of an idea that it was, but that is what they did. So, the Crown or DA for our American friends decided to drop all the charges, and it's just in time for Mohammed to make it to Duke University. And Elana? Well, she joined him a few months later after she had finally finished her own residency. But you know what? Most of her family and friends was having a big-time issue with why would she take him back. I mean, here she is, a beautiful young lady, incredibly smart, well-educated, financially independent. She had family and friends that loved her. She did not need him at all. So why take him back? Some believe that she was a big-time optimist. She saw a small bit of happiness with somebody, and she clung on to it super tight, like that he'd change. I mean, she definitely loved him, and she hoped that eventually he may change. And I have to admit, once they got into the new home, things did improve. I mean, they even started running marathons together, getting up way before the sun even did to start their training. And after that run, Elana would drop off their daughters to daycare, and Mohammed and her would then take off to their classes. Mohammed pretty much impressed everyone in his program, and he was considered to be the all-star. I mean, the dude did take a 5-year program and complete it in 3.5 years. And as for Elana, well, she was no slouch either. She actually applied for and won a very rare scholarship that paid for most of her tuition. She was, in fact, considered by most to be the big brain of her program. And of course, after class, she'd go and pick Mohammed and their daughter up and then go home, where she would then prepare supper. And on the 5th of November, 2007, they actually welcomed daughter number 2. Now, you know how I said the relationship had improved? Well, it was still far from perfect. For example, you know how when you're married, you and your spouse are supposed to be equal partners in everything you do? Well, in Mohammed and Elana's case, not so much. And the thing is, Elana's friends have picked up on it. And yeah, I mean, she pretty much did it all, from being a chauffeur to doing all the grocery shopping, putting together any furniture that had to be assembled, even changing the light bulbs in the house. All this stuff was considered to be her duties. And what was Mohammed's responsibilities at this time? Well, it was pretty much to just study. And she'd go on and on about how smart her husband was, and that compared to him, she was like absolutely nothing. Now that seemed pretty strange to most of her friends, because most of them pretty much considered that she was the superior one. And when they weren't, physically together, she'd always have to check in with him. She'd have to get his permission to do pretty much anything. And if she went out with friends to lunch or something, he'd constantly be calling and asking who she's with, what are they talking about, all that kind of stuff. Her friends starting to pick up that he might be a bit of a control freak. Now, Elana was normally a little ray of sunshine, but from time to time her friends would find her crying. In fact, she even told one of them, and I quote here, "My relationship isn't what people think it is. If they only knew. Wow, I just can't imagine living like that or making someone else live like that." In 2009, they graduated from Duke University and moved back to Ottawa, they got a place very close to the hospital. Elana opened up a medical practice, where she became quickly loved by every patient she had. As for Mohammed, he went back to his neurosurgery studies, where, quite surprisingly, he had an award-winning bedside manner. And I mean it too, the dude actually won awards for this. I know, right? That is so surprising considering the kind of guy he is. But sometimes, how someone is in public and how they are in private are two separate people. Sort of like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde sort of thing. Now it was around this time they started developing a social media presence. And of course, they portrayed themselves as a jet-setting couple very much in love, with two beautiful kids, pretty much the picture-perfect family. But Elana admitted to a few of her friends that the whole social media thing was a big fat lie. And it was pretty much totally controlled by Mohammed. And of course, his control did not end with social media. He pretty much controlled all aspects of their home life as well. She even had to ask the dude for permission before buying a subscription to the Globe and Mail newspaper, which he of course said no to. He even told his children who they could and could not play with. And he did not much like Elena's parenting style, and he made sure she knew it too. And of course, he would insult her a lot. And the stuff he would come out with would be like pages right from the control freak's handbook. Stuff like he thought she was useless and stuff like that. Well, I could see how Elana fell for the big lug. I mean, he seems like he's such a charming guy, doesn't he? Anyway, in 2011 he took off to Calgary for a whole year. I guess he was taking more classes, this time on being a spinal surgeon. But while he was there, he decided to play doctor with one of his colleagues. Elana found out, of course. She found some emails, as well as a credit card payment related to the affair. And as you probably guessed, she did indeed confront him about it, and he didn't deny it at all. I bet you that somewhere in his little demented head, he thought he was in the right for doing it. He's wrong, but of course try and tell him that. You know what? I bet he did not even care about how much pain he caused his wife. Of course, once this got out, most of her friends thought that maybe this will make her leave him. But nope. The way she saw it is that she's got to make it work no matter what. She figured that they had 2 kids, and she still loved him with all her heart. All she wanted was for him to love her back. You know what, people, I get that, and I've heard all that stuff so many times before, but no matter how much you love the guy or the girl, you just can't make them love you back. And I gotta tell you, I honestly don't think that Mohammed ever loved Elana at all. I think the only thing he's ever loved is himself. Sorry, you'll have to forgive me. I'm a really old man. And I do what all old men do. I rant. Well, Mohammed did promise to end the affair, and before long he got the job that he always wanted. A neurosurgeon at the Toronto hospital. So they packed up their stuff and moved to a pretty big place in North York, which is the subdivision of Toronto. Of course, unfortunately, that meant Elana had to give up her practice, which I assume was a pretty big disappointment to both her and her patients. But once they were moved in, Elana got a job at a clinic that was just down the street from where they lived. And well, she really didn't like it that much. She found it unfulfilling. In fact, she had told several friends that she didn't go through all the education she did at school just to treat a bunch of sore throats. And what do you think Mohammed's answer was to his wife's boredom? Well, he just turned to his wife, looked at her square in the eyes, and said, "Hey hun, why don't we have another baby?" He said the house is pretty big, it's got 4 bedrooms, one of which is empty. Besides, he's always wanted a son. I'd like to say that Elana said no. But yeah, a couple months later she's knocked up for the 3rd time. Elana figured that the 3rd child may actually fix the marriage. Yeah. That never works. But they did indeed have a son who was born in October 2013. And for a few years their relationship did improve slightly. Elana even made a new friend, and her name was Allison. She was actually Elana's boss from the clinic, and she actually bought a house just across the street from her. And the two of them got to be pretty tight. And Mohammed? Well, he settled into his new gig as a neurosurgeon, and he was doing some pretty cutting-edge stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, he was a pretty crappy person, but he was an absolutely brilliant surgeon. In fact, most people called him the miracle worker. In 2015, she became so bored with her position at the clinic that she ended up quitting. But then she got a position that she could really sink her teeth into. It was at the family medicine unit at the Scarborough Hospital. And she also took a job with District 11 of the Ontario Medical Association, or the OMA. Well, I personally think that's way cool. But Mohammed, well, he could not disagree more. You'd think that if his wife's career started to thrive that he'd be proud of her, but no, all it did was cheese him off more. In 2016, They decided to take off to Vermont as a family trip, to do a bit of skiing. Of course, they first had to swing through Ottawa to drop their baby son off at Mohammed's folks' place. But that night, Mohammed called Elana's parents with some disturbing news. It seems that Elana was in the hospital with a cut on her right palm. How did it get there, you may be asking? Well, that's actually kind of hard to say. You see, Elana told one person that it happened by accident when she slammed the glass on the table. He told someone else that the glass broke while it was being washed, and she told someone else that it just happened when she was cutting some vegetables. But once she was released from the hospital, they continued on their merry way towards Vermont. But it really wasn't a very relaxing trip, seeing how they got into an argument about Mohammed's affair again. He actually told her that she was a much better lover than Elana was. My God, dude, are you actually being paid to be a butthead? Anyway, when she got home, she actually told a few of her friends that, at one point, he actually grabbed her by the neck. And they of course asked her why she didn't call the cops then and there. Elana's response: well, she was afraid that, because of them being in the States and all, it would not have ended well for a guy named Mohammed. Of course, their Twitter and Facebook accounts painted everything as if it was sunshine and rainbows. But as I already said, things are not always as they seem. In fact, she once again started talking about divorce. And of course, old Mohammed begged Elana not to go through with it. He swore he could change and that things will only get better. And Elana, being the kind soul that she was, granted him a bit of time to get his act together. But, in the back of her head, she still feared that Mohammed was still cheating. And when she mentioned her concerns to a friend, that friend, just joking, said, you know what, Elana, maybe you should have your own affair. Well, I don't think she actually took it as a joke, more like sage advice, because that's exactly what she did. It was with another doctor that she worked with. This guy was also married with children. Now, it's normally at this point that I'd say something like 2 wrongs don't make a right, or I'd point out that if your spouse is cheating on you, you going out to have your own affair would not improve things. But, in this case, I'd actually be wrong. You see, even though cheating in any form is wrong, it actually did Elana some good. It made her feel desirable again, like she was worth something again. And that is something she hasn't felt since she met Mohammed. And it actually empowered her to picture life without the almighty Mohammed. So she talked to a lawyer. She told him how her husband has injured her both physically and emotionally. She had also said that at one point she thought her children was the reason she needs to stay, but now she felt that her children is the reason she needs to leave. She now felt that she needed to get herself and them out of that house before the toxicity spills out onto them. So, in November, she decided the marriage was absolutely over. Upon hearing this, how did Mohammed respond? He bought a big, huge box of chocolates. Dude, did you actually think that was gonna work? I mean, what did you think was gonna happen? What did you think that she was gonna take one look at that big box of chocolates and go, oh baby, of course I forgive you for all the cheating and the physical stuff you put me through, because you got me a big box of chocolates? Well, my friends, as you can probably guess, it did not work at all. In fact, on the 24th of November, she emailed an old friend. In it she wrote, "Sorry for being so absent these past few months. I am in the process of separating/divorcing my husband, and things at home are chaotic. I will try to connect with you this weekend. I will be away at a conference." And on the Friday, she did indeed leave on a weekend-long conference for OMA. Now while there, she spoke on panels and did a lot of socializing. In other words, she had a blast, and all without Mohammed. But he still sent out tweets to her all weekend long. The last one she received was on Sunday, and it read, and I quote, "Congrats at Elana Fric, Shamji. Best wishes for a successful meeting. Oh Mohammed, you're such a romantic." She got home from her conference on Sunday, and Mohammed was served with divorce papers on the Monday. The stuff that was in the papers were fairly standard, stuff about how she wanted it done quickly and fairly. But it did state that Elana wanted total financial disclosure. At this time, Elana moved into the basement of the house. Of course, Mohammed, never been able to take a hint, kept taking her stuff out of the basement and putting it right back into the bedroom. Then, on Wednesday night, Elana received a call from her mom. Elana said she couldn't be on the phone for that long, and her mother warned her to be careful. But Elana reassured her not to worry, and that Mohammed was not about to do anything stupid. But that was not the last phone call that Elana made that night. The last call she made was actually to 611, but most people think that she was actually trying to dial 911 and dialed 611 by mistake. The next morning was like total radio silence from Elana. I mean, her parents tried to call and text her and they got nothing. They did, however, get a hold of Mohammed. And all he said was that she left with her suitcase and her boyfriend. Well, to Anna that sounded like total BS. And it kind of understandably caused her to panic a bit. So, Elana's mother called Allison. You guys remember her. She's Elena's once boss and friend that lives across the street. Well, Anna asked Allison to do a wellness check on her daughter, which she was just too happy to do. She started off by peeking into the garage, and it seems that Elana's Honda Pilot was still parked in the garage. Allison reported this back to Elena's parents. At this point, totally concerned over their daughter's well-being, they called the police, and they drove through the night from Windsor to Toronto in hopes of helping their daughter. They arrived at their daughter's house at around 5 a.m. They had their own key, so they let themselves in and checked things out. And what they found was nothing. And what I mean by nothing is no Elana. But they did notice that 2 rugs from the main floor had gone missing. Anna went into the kitchen and started to wash the dishes, and she made breakfast for the children. She had decided that crepes were on the menu. While she was in the kitchen, she was able to overhear Mohammed, who was upstairs. He was on the phone, and she heard him say her parents are here now. A few minutes later they heard the phone ring as someone tried to call, but the weird thing is all the handsets for the wireless phones were in the master bedroom, and I mean all of them. That includes the unit from the kitchen, living room, everywhere. They were all moved upstairs. Soon, Elana's daughters came downstairs. They came into the kitchen without saying a word and took their seats, not looking at their grandparents even once. Just sitting there with their heads down. Now, you might be wondering why the girls were like that. Well, don't forget, Mohammed and Elana were fighting mere feet from where the kids slept. In fact, the one daughter did get up to investigate, but was ordered back to bed by her father. So did they see anything? Probably not. But they probably heard every bloody thing. Eventually Mohammed did come downstairs and said, "So you're the ones that called the police." Then he asked if there's any more crepes left. Later that afternoon the police found a suitcase. It had been thrown by the Humber River by Kleinbug. When they opened it, they discovered the body of Elana Fric Shamji, still wearing her pajamas and in bare feet. Most of her hair had been hacked off. Her face was so swollen that Anna could not even recognize her. So Elana's father Joe had to identify her body. When he looked at her, the only thing he could muster to say was, "That's my daughter." Oh man, can you imagine what those poor people are going through? I honestly don't even want to imagine. There is truly no worse fate than a parent outliving their young. The next day, the cops picked up Mohammed Shamji at some coffee shop in Mississauga. He was charged with unaliving his wife in the 1st degree. Now, if convicted, he could get life imprisonment. In Canada, that's about 25 years. But, as they started with their jury selection in 2019, Mohammed took a plea deal. Instead of 1st degree, he opted to plead guilty to the lesser charge of 2nd degree. Now you may be asking yourself, in Canada, what's the difference between 1st degree and 2nd degree? Well, it's true that they both carry out mandatory life sentence of 25 years. With 1st degree, there's no chance of parole, which means you're in there for the whole 25 years. But 2nd degree, there is a possibility of parole. So what was his sentence? He was sentenced to life in prison with the chance of parole after 14 years. But, seeing how he was sitting in jail since 2016, he could actually be out in 11.5 years because of time served. Now don't get me wrong, I love Canada, and I love being a Canadian, but I do wish we were a bit tougher on crime. I'm not sure if this opinion's going to make me popular or not, but I think that when you commit a crime like this, you should get life imprisonment. And when I say life imprisonment, that's exactly what I mean. Not 25 years, but your natural life. That's just my opinion, remember. They laid Elana to rest on December 17, 2016. During the funeral, Elana's youngest daughter read a poem that her mother wrote when she was younger. It was called Hillside Strangers. We climb away on our chosen path with only our soul as a guide. While they were waiting for the court proceedings to begin, Elana's parents decided to move into Elana's house to care for their grandchildren in hopes that they'd have some kind of normal life. Which, I should point out, they now have custody of the kids. And this'll probably come as a surprise to no one. But none of the kids want anything to do with their father. And why should they? I mean, he stopped being daddy and just became the guy that took their mom away the instant he unalived Elana, effectively pretty much turning them into orphans. The eldest daughter pretty much wallpapered her bedroom with images of her mom. And the one day when the grandson was about 3 years old, they could hear him laughing in his room, So they went up to investigate, and there was the little guy standing on his bed giggling. When they asked him what was so funny, he said Mommy was just here, and she kissed me. Of course, his grandparents just assumed he was dreaming. But I choose to believe that maybe she had just come back to say goodbye. But hey, that's just me. We at Night Owl want to send out our deepest, most heartfelt condolences to Elana's friends and family, and we hoped that she had found the peace that she was denied in life. And I have a special message for her children. Please, try not to focus so much on how her life came to an end, but think instead how her life was lived. Well, I think that's where we're going to end up for the day. But please, tell me what you think of this story in the comments. Do you think justice was served, or do you think Mohammed got off a bit easy? Please tell me what you think. And please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. And remember to turn on your notifications. It'll really help us out. And remember, be you good or be you wicked, everybody deserves justice. Good night.